The dimly lit private study's mahogany-paneled walls seemed to almost shudder with an eerie vibrancy, as though reverberating to the staccato pacing echoing across its plush confines. Halfway across the globe from the bucolic grounds of Montecito, seasoned royal correspondent Neil Sean found himself unable to fully shake the niggling disquiet that had drawn him here this evening. He spared a sidelong glance over the various framed photos and awards adorning the antique credenza, mementos commemorating decades of insider access and hard-earned scoops surrounding the world's most preeminent monarchies. Yet even those nostalgic talismans offered little solace against the simmering trepidation triggered by the dossier's sordid implications. The rapid cadence of Neil's footfalls slowed to an abrupt halt before the room's centerpiece, an immense brass-trimmed oak desk laden with the very source material metabolizing his mounting unease with every fresh perusal. Lowering himself into the supple Chesterfield desk chair with a weary sigh, the veteran broadcaster reached for the innocuous thumb drive containing the files that threatened to unhinge everything. As the encrypted data cache transferred onto his tablet's secured drive, Neil felt his throat tightening with each incriminating video snippet and shocking photograph populating the display. Despite every natural inclination towards journalistic impartiality drilled into his psyche over the years, the disturbing revelations playing out in vivid digital detail triggered a sickened recoil he was powerless to contain. Jesus bloody Christ! He muttered despondently while unconsciously palming sweat from his brow. If even half these unblooded horrors prove legit, it'll be open season on dismantling the entire festering Monte shit show for years of wanton deception and public manipulation. Details that would strip away any lingering pretense of the Duchess' carefully curated victimhood branding and social justice iconography. Evidence of depravities invoking decadence and vanity on an exorbitant scale potentially calamitous to Archwell's entire charity mission if substantiated. And looming over it all like some depraved avatar, the very figure at the crux of this damning exposé, little Lilibet, Diana Mountbatten Windsor herself. The supposed cherub emblem of woke reinvention and heartwarming new beginnings whose existence now stood poised to torpedo the entire sham into a self-immolating PR apocalypse. Neil swiped through the bombshell files with sickened captivation, every multimedia atrocity more lurid and cynical than the last. His finger hovered over the play button of one particularly harrowing video while a queasy knot twisted his guts into a Gordian pretzel. The unspeakably lavish hospitality suite at one of London's most opulent hotels set the scene for what looked like a multi-camera production shoot. Golden folding screens partitioned off artfully neutral backdrops swarmed with high-definition recording equipment and blazing spotlights. Sumptuously arranged floral centerpieces adorned sleek buffet spreads brimming with hors d'oeuvres, expensive liquors and delicacies offering no expense spared. He watched in mute horror as the petite auburn-haired figure of Lilibet was gently ushered into the makeshift studio by her rictus-grinning mother. The toddler's cherubic face conveyed a puzzled innocence as she was led towards her staging marks, her frilly pink gown a jarring contrast to the decidedly unchildlike context unfolding. Then with a barked cue from off-camera, the deluge of exploitation commenced in earnest. Lily's chubby cheeks puffed into an exaggerated smile and she dutifully began cycling through various exaggerated poses to elicit maximum mawkishness, burying her face in her hands while giggling adorably only to then project upturned puppy dog peering into the lens. Neil felt bile burn the back of his throat as each subsequent tableau shamelessly degraded the toddler's precocious mannerisms and cherubic innocence into vapid minstrelsy. The damning reel cycled through increasingly staged scenarios of absurd condescension and racial tokenism clearly designed to invoke peak schmaltz from the most credulous viewer. In one particularly galling segment, Lily even clutched a plush doll caricaturing her famous grandaunt while batting her eyes towards the cameras as a pitchman's disembodied voice barked instructions offset. "Okay, good, now give me princess of hugs and kisses," beaming adoringly at the Meemaw dollies. Make sure to really exaggerate those giant apple cheeks for maximum squeeze factor. As Neil watched the ensuing sickening pantomime literally extort pleas of guileless mimicry from the toddler, he felt revulsion course through his very marrow. How the mighty had fallen into shilling their own progeny's dignity for mass merchandising and social media branding virality. He paused the gut-churning playback and slammed the tablet down with trembling hand. Drawing a few steadying lungfuls, the broadcaster leaned back to scrub that harrowing glimpse of exploitation from his psyche. Yet even in the solitary quiet he found little insulation from the damning evidence, implications rippling through every corner of the industry Neil had devoted his life to covering. The staggering abuses of trust amid the very highest corridors of reverence and aspiration he'd elevated to a pedestal left him utterly shaken. Part of him couldn't fathom even conceiving how far the grotesque display of self-debasement reached beyond these preliminary glimpses into Montecito's moral event horizon. But the larger voice of responsibility nagged with withering clarity of purpose, that it fell to Neil and his credibility to wrestle these subversions into the blinding light of global accountability, regardless of reputations incinerated. Hardening his resolution with another deep exhalation, he retrieved his mobile and keyed up the first of many inevitable damage control calls that would need marshalling for containment. As the line began ringing, Neil allowed only a solitary grim murmur to pass his lips. Time to raise it all down to the fucking studs. In the days and weeks following that harrowing late-night summit, shock waves of revulsion rippled across every corner of global nobility. From Clarence House to Holyrood House, the Sussex revelations created an atmosphere of hushed consternation as every credible vetting pointed to the damning evidence's veracity. And at the epicenter of the tsunami swelling towards full cataclysm stood Neil Sean's formidable presence as chief tribune before the media maelstrom. He found himself inundated with countless interview requests and appearances clamoring for insider insights. Yet despite the insatiable fervor goading every interaction, Sean maintained a steadfast opposition towards amplifying any salacious curiosities or innuendos. As I've reiterated ad nauseum to your colleagues in this field, the only details I feel any obligation to disclose are those already on record within official legal channels, he stated firmly to the fusillade of interrogators. Beyond that, the deeply distressing nature of these materials understandably demands a strict adherence to discretion and taste fully divorced from sensationalism or gossip-mongering. Every microphone and lens remained trained in rapt anticipation, awaiting even the faintest hint of impropriety to pounce upon. Neil drew a steadying breath before continuing. To reiterate through the barest abstracts. These recent upheavals stem from a cache of documented evidence depicting the youngest offspring being systematically indoctrinated into a sophisticated branding endeavor whose questionable practices and methodologies invoke overt exploitation and emotional coercion, he stated through pursed lips. I'm reasonably certain many would opine the prurient monetization of a toddler's naivety visible throughout these materials to promote a very specific public relations agenda surpasses even the most elastic ethical boundaries of propriety. Perhaps sensing those restrained descriptors had only whetted public fervor, Neil finally opted for a measured elaboration of the fallout still unfolding. Suffice to say, many influential corners are now calling for a thorough reinvestigation of the broader business practices and expenditures surrounding Archwell's nonprofit ventures to begin auditing any potential misappropriations or conflicts